The night Hannah laughed and said she would marry the first man who walked through the cafe doors, she was trying not to cry. The joke came out sharp and careless, the way brittle things do when they are about to break. The cafe in Cedar Grove, Ohio, buzzed with the low hum of grinders and small-town gossip, and the rain tapped hard against the wide front windows as if it wanted to come inside. Hannah stood behind the counter with flour on her cheek and exhaustion buried deep in her bones. She was 29 and felt twice that age. The bakery she had inherited from her mother was barely surviving. The rent was overdue. The oven had been making a rattling sound that no repairman could quite fix. And that morning, she had opened an envelope from the bank that made her hands shake so badly she had to sit down. Across from her, her friend Megan had been teasing her about still being single, about how life had passed her by while everyone else seemed to be moving forward. Marriages, babies, second babies, the kind of teasing that is meant to be light but lands heavy when your heart is already bruised. Hannah wiped down the counter and, with a tired grin that did not reach her eyes, said she would marry the first man who walked in. She said it loudly enough for the two college girls in the corner to laugh. She said it as if love were a lottery ticket, and she was done pretending she cared about the numbers. If you had been standing there, watching her, would you have known it was not really about marriage at all? Would you have recognized the fear hiding inside that joke? What would you have done if your life felt like it was narrowing into a hallway with no doors left? The bell above the cafe door chimed. Hannah did not turn around at first. She was still smiling at Megan, still pretending. But Megan's expression changed. It softened into something curious, almost startled. Hannah followed her gaze. A man stood just inside the doorway, shaking rain from his jacket. He was tall but carried himself as if he were trying to take up less space. His hair was damp and dark, curling slightly at the ends. In one hand, he held a small, trembling hand. The child attached to it, maybe 4 years old, clutched a stuffed rabbit whose fur had thinned from too much love. The little boy's sneakers were soaked, and his eyes, large and watchful, scanned the room like he expected it to reject him. The man looked up and met Hannah's gaze. There was something raw there, not desperation, not exactly, just weariness. The kind that seeps into a person after too many nights without sleep and too many mornings without hope. Hannah felt her joke hanging in the air between them, absurd and reckless. He ordered coffee and a hot chocolate in a voice that was steady but low. His name, she would learn later, was Caleb. The boy was Noah. They had just moved to town. The apartment they were supposed to rent had fallen through that afternoon. Their car had broken down on the highway 30 miles back. They were waiting for a tow truck that might not come until morning. The storm outside grew heavier, as if the sky had chosen that moment to pour out everything it had been holding. Hannah handed Noah the hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. The boy stared at it as though it were a miracle. Caleb thanked her, and when he smiled, it was small and careful, like he was out of practice. There are moments in life that do not announce themselves as important. They look ordinary. A man walking into a cafe, a child sipping hot chocolate. But sometimes, that is how everything changes. Caleb and Noah sat near the window. The cafe emptied as the evening deepened. Megan left, squeezing Hannah's shoulder as she whispered something about fate and destiny. Hannah rolled her eyes, but she felt something stirring inside her chest, something unfamiliar and frightening. When closing time came, the rain had not stopped. Caleb checked his phone and sighed. The tow truck was delayed. The mechanic could not look at the car until morning. The nearest motel was miles away, and he had spent most of his savings on the move. Hannah did not think. She heard herself offering the small apartment above the bakery. It was cramped and cluttered, but it was warm. Caleb hesitated, pride flashing across his face like lightning. But then Noah yawned, his small body swaying with exhaustion, and Caleb nodded. That night, as thunder shook the windows, Hannah lay awake listening to the soft footsteps upstairs. She told herself she was being foolish, letting a stranger stay under her roof, getting involved in someone else's problems when she could barely handle her own. But beneath the anxiety, there was something else, a quiet sense of rightness. In the morning, she found Noah sitting at one of the bakery tables, carefully arranging sugar packets into neat little rows. Caleb stood at the counter, insisting on paying for the room, for the kindness, for the coffee. Hannah waved him off, though she needed the money more than she cared to admit. Over the next few days, while the car was repaired and Caleb searched for steady work, they returned to the cafe again and again. Noah grew comfortable enough to laugh. Caleb's shoulders loosened. Hannah learned that Caleb's wife had died 2 years earlier after a long illness. He had tried to stay in the same town, the same house, but every corner had been heavy with memory. He had finally decided to start over somewhere new, somewhere small enough to breathe. Grief recognized grief. Hannah had lost her mother suddenly to a stroke 3 years earlier. The bakery had been her mother's dream, and Hannah had stepped into it without knowing how to carry the weight. Some nights, she still reached for her phone to call her. There was no grand declaration between them, no sweeping romance. There were just small things. Caleb fixing the broken hinge on the bakery door without being asked. Hannah kneeling to tie Noah's shoe when Caleb's hands were full. Shared coffee at dawn before the town woke up. The town, of course, began to talk. Small towns always do. Some people were kind, others were suspicious. A single woman and a single father spending so much time together. Hannah felt the old fear creeping back in. The fear of being judged, of failing, of choosing wrong. One afternoon, she overheard a customer whisper that Caleb was probably just using her for a place to stay. The words cut deeper than she expected. That night, she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had been naive. If you had been in her place, would you have stepped back? Would you have protected your fragile heart at all costs? Or would you have risked it, knowing how much it could hurt? The bank called again. The deadline was approaching. If Hannah could not make a substantial payment, the bakery would be seized. She sat at the counter after closing, the numbers swimming before her eyes. She had not told Caleb. She did not want to add to his burdens, but he noticed anyway. He always noticed. When she finally admitted the truth, her voice broke. The bakery was not just a business. It was her mother's laughter echoing in the kitchen. It was flour-dusted hugs and the smell of cinnamon on Sunday mornings. Losing it would feel like losing her all over again. Caleb listened without interrupting. The next morning, he showed up before sunrise with a plan. He had worked in marketing years ago, before everything fell apart. The bakery, he said gently, had heart but no visibility. They could create a social media page, offer baking classes for kids, partner with the church down the street for events. He would do the work for free. Hannah resisted at first. Pride again. But desperation has a way of humbling you. They worked side by side for weeks. Flyers went up around town. Photos of frosted cupcakes and warm bread filled the internet. Noah became the unofficial taste tester, his giggles echoing through the kitchen. Slowly, cautiously, customers returned. Not in floods, but in steady streams. There were setbacks. A batch of bread burned during a particularly busy afternoon. A cruel online comment suggested the bakery was outdated and overpriced. Hannah cried in the storage room where no one could see her. Caleb found her there and did not offer empty reassurances. He simply sat beside her until the storm inside her quieted. In those silent moments, something deeper than attraction began to take root. Trust, the kind that grows slowly, like ivy climbing brick. Months passed. The leaves outside turned from green to gold. The bakery's numbers improved. Not enough to make Hannah rich, but enough to breathe. Enough to hope. One evening, as they closed up, Noah tugged on Hannah's sweater and asked if she was going to stay forever. The question hit her harder than any bank notice ever had. Forever was a dangerous word. Forever was what she had once imagined with a man who left when things got complicated. Forever was what Caleb had lost. She knelt down and told Noah she was not going anywhere right now. It was the most honest answer she could give. Caleb watched them, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. The proposal, when it came, was nothing like the fairy tales Hannah had once pinned to her bedroom wall. There were no roses scattered across the floor, no violin music. just the three of them in the empty bakery after closing, the scent of sugar lingering in the air. Caleb spoke quietly about second chances, about how he had not believed in them until he walked into a small cafe on a stormy night. He said he had not been looking for love, he had only been looking for shelter. But sometimes, he said, shelter turns into home. Hannah felt the weight of every choice she had ever made pressing down on her. She thought of her mother, of the jokes she had made, of the fear that had once ruled her. She thought of Noah's small hand in hers. Love, she realized, was not about grand gestures. It was about showing up, again and again, on ordinary days, in quiet rooms, through storms. She said yes. Marriage did not erase their struggles. Bills still arrived. Grief still ambushed them on unexpected anniversaries. There were arguments about parenting and money and exhaustion. There were nights when Noah woke up crying for the mother he barely remembered, and Caleb would sit on the edge of his bed, helpless and heartbroken. But there were also mornings filled with laughter. There were flower fights in the kitchen. There were evenings when the bakery lights glowed warmly against the dark, and Hannah would pause on the sidewalk to watch Caleb inside, teaching Noah how to knead dough, their heads bent together. Years later, when people asked how they met, Hannah would smile and tell them about the joke. She would shake her head at her younger self, at the girl who thought marriage was a lifeline thrown into deep water. She understood now that what she had really been asking for that night was not a husband, but hope. If that rain had not fallen, if the car had not broken down, if pride had won over kindness, their lives might have remained separate, two lonely paths running parallel but never touching. Instead, a single dad walked through a door, carrying more pain than luggage, and found a woman who was brave enough to let him stay. Before this story closes, tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were Hannah that night. Would you have let a stranger into your life, or would fear have locked the door? And if this story truly touched your heart, if it made you believe even a little more in second chances and quiet miracles, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, but only if it genuinely moved you. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness open the biggest doors, and you never know who might be standing on the other side, waiting to change your life forever.